Okay, so I need you to stop for a second. Like, genuinely stop whatever you're doing, because something happened in Austria that the tennis world is still trying to process, and honestly, I don't think they ever will. A 20-year-old girl from the Philippines just walked into one of the most hostile environments in European tennis, on a surface she wasn't supposed to thrive on, in front of a crowd that wanted to see her fail, and she didn't just win. She made it look inevitable. And the craziest part? The people who set this whole thing up are the ones who should be most embarrassed right now. So let's actually talk about what happened, because the headlines you're reading? They're missing the entire story. You've probably seen it by now. Alexandra, or Alex as we call her here, beat Julia Grabher at the Lindt Open in Austria. And if you only saw the scoreline, you might have thought, okay, solid win, impressive result, good for her. But that surface-level reaction completely misses the psychological war that took place on that court. Because this wasn't just a tennis match. This was a test. A calculated, deliberate, almost arrogant test designed by people who genuinely believed they had finally figured out how to stop her. And they were wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Here's the context you need to understand first. The Lindt Open just turned 35 this year. It's a historic event, a celebrated event, one of those tournaments with deep roots in Austrian tennis culture. And this year, for the first time in the tournament's history, the organizers made a dramatic change. They ripped out the traditional hard courts, brought in over 100 tons of European red clay, and essentially built a temporary clay court arena right in the middle of the city. Now the official reason was tradition, heritage, celebrating the anniversary. But think about the timing for a second. Think about who was entered in the draw. Think about what surface has historically separated the European veterans from the rising international challengers. Does it start to make a little more sense now? Because when you look at the bracket and you see that Alex was drawn against Julia Grabher in the very first round, it's hard not to see the bigger picture. Grabher is 29 years old. She's a former top 55 ranked player in the world. She spent practically her entire career developing her game on clay, and she's Austrian, meaning this was her tournament, her crowd, her court, her moment. The establishment looked at this matchup and thought they had built the perfect wall. And honestly, from a purely tactical standpoint, you understand why they felt confident. They looked at Alex's game, that explosive baseline power, those heavy flat ground strokes, that aggressive return game, and they said, okay, all of that becomes much less dangerous on heavy clay. The ball bounces slower. The rallies get longer. The physical grind takes over. And a seasoned European clay court specialist with home crowd energy? That's exactly the kind of situation built to knock a young, rising player off their rhythm. The betting markets agreed. The analysts agreed. The commentators agreed. And when you add the 3,000 screaming Austrian fans packed into that center court, you start to see why everyone assumed this was going to be Alex's first serious reality check on the European swing. But here's what they forgot. Here's the detail that somehow slipped through every algorithm and every tactical breakdown and every confident prediction. Where exactly do you think Alex learned how to play tennis? Not on hard courts. Not on grass. She was developed, shaped, and sharpened at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain. And if you don't know what that place is, it is not a fancy training facility with pristine courts and comfortable lounges. It is one of the most demanding athletic environments on the planet, built on brutal, unforgiving red clay, designed to produce players who don't just survive pressure, they consume it. Rafael Nadal, the man who won Roland Garros 14 times, the greatest clay court player in the history of the sport, essentially built the philosophical blueprint for how Alex approaches every single point on that surface. So when the Austrian organizers brought in their 100 tons of clay and thought they were putting her in unfamiliar territory, what they actually did was invite her home. And Alex knew it the moment she walked onto that court. You could see it in the way she warmed up. You could see it in the way she looked across the net at Grabher. There was no anxiety in her body language. There was no wide-eyed nerves from a young player stepping into a pressure situation. There was something much more unsettling than nerves. There was calm. A very specific kind of calm that only comes from someone who has been in far harder rooms than this one and walked out the other side stronger every single time. And then the match started, and everything the establishment had planned began to unravel almost immediately. Grabher came out with her heavy kick serve, that signature shot she's used to push opponents deep behind the baseline and force them into defensive, scrambling tennis. It's worked against countless players over her career. Alex stepped forward and took it early. Not just once. Consistently. Every single time Grabher tried to push her back, Alex absorbed the spin, flattened it out, and drove the ball deep into the corners with this suffocating, venomous topspin that started taking the racket out of Grabher's hands. And the crowd, those 3,000 passionate Austrian fans, they tried. They really tried. Every time Grabher found a moment, every time she earned a break-point opportunity and the energy in the stadium started building, Alex closed it down. Shut the door. First serve out wide. Down the tee. A defensive passing shot on a dead sprint that had no business going in. The kind of point that makes you wonder if the laws of physics apply to her the same way they apply to everyone else. You want to know the exact moment you could feel the match shift? It was mid-second set. Grabher had fought hard to stay in the match, and the crowd was still giving her everything. And then Alex hit a forehand winner from so far outside the court, running so far into the corner that the commentators literally went quiet for a second before reacting. That was the moment. Because Grabher felt it too. You could see it in her shoulders. You could see it in the way she bounced the ball before her next serve, just a little slower than before. The will was starting to crack. And once Alex sensed that, she was merciless. By the end of the match, that arena that started at full volume had gone almost completely silent. You could hear footsteps on the clay. You could hear the sound of Grabher's heavy breathing between points. 3,000 people had come to watch their hometown hero defend European tennis pride, and instead they watched a 20-year-old Filipina systematically dismantle her on her best surface, in her home country, in front of everyone who believed it couldn't happen. Now let's talk about the one thing nobody is giving enough credit to, because the performance itself was remarkable, but there's another layer here that changed the atmosphere of that entire building. When Alex walked out of that tunnel, she wasn't alone. The Filipino diaspora across Europe showed up to that tournament in numbers that shocked the commentators on live television. They were louder than anyone expected. They were more organized, more passionate, more relentless than the home crowd anticipated. The Austrian fans paid for their tickets, but Alex's supporters took the emotional energy of that arena and made it theirs. And that matters more than people realize, because when you're a young player on a strange court in a foreign country, hearing your people in the stands doesn't just feel good. It changes your body chemistry. It slows your heart rate. It reminds you that you're not alone out there. And for Grabher, hearing her home crowd slowly get drowned out by Filipino cheers is a psychological blow that doesn't show up in the stats but absolutely shows up in the tennis. So now think about where this leaves everyone else in the draw. Think about what Yelena Ostapenko, the fourth seed, was watching from her hotel room during that match. She had a bye in the first round, so she was probably sitting there expecting to see the Austrian veteran advance and set up a manageable second-round match. Instead, she watched Alex take apart a clay court specialist on clay in Austria with full crowd pressure and make it look completely controlled. How do you prepare for that? What part of your game plan gives you confidence walking onto the court against someone who just did what Alex just did? The locker room is not at peace right now. The veterans who thought the European clay swing would finally expose something, some weakness, some gap in her game, they don't have that comfort anymore. That surface advantage they were counting on? Gone. And here's the thing that makes Alex so genuinely difficult to game plan against. It's not just the tennis. It's the mindset. Most young players, when they step into a hostile environment, a loud crowd, an unfamiliar surface, a veteran opponent with something to prove, they feel the weight of the moment. They either rush or they go passive. They stop playing their game and start reacting to everyone else's. Alex does the opposite. The bigger the moment, the more present she becomes. The louder the crowd, the slower she seems to breathe. It's the kind of mental discipline that you cannot manufacture. Either the pressure sharpens you or it doesn't. For Alex, it always sharpens her. And this is what the tennis establishment, the media, the analysts who wrote their confident predictions before the first serve fundamentally failed to understand. They judged her on surface statistics and draw conditions. They forgot to account for the human being standing on the other side of the net. A human being who was built for exactly this. The clay wasn't a trap. The crowd wasn't a pressure test. Julia Grabher wasn't a wall. They were all just the next chapter. And Alex wrote it in her own words, on her own terms, in front of everyone who doubted her. So what happens next? Ostapenko is waiting. The rest of the clay court swing is waiting. The entire European tennis world is now watching with a very different kind of attention than they were 48 hours ago. Not the attention of people who expect her to fall. The attention of people who are starting to realize they might be watching something they've never actually seen before. A 20-year-old, Nadal-trained, mentally bulletproof, multi-surface force of nature who has absolutely no intention of slowing down. Tell me something. After everything you just watched, after everything that happened in Austria today, is there a single player left on this clay court swing that you genuinely believe can stop her? Drop it in the comments. I want your honest take. Because right now, watching from where I'm standing, I'm not sure there is.